She wasn't supposed to hear it. But the bathroom had marble walls. And marble doesn't absorb sound, it amplifies it. Did you see what she's wearing? Her hands froze under the running water. The dress had been perfect an hour ago. Simple, elegant, a deep navy that made her feel like herself, not like someone trying to be someone else. But now, standing in the gilded restroom of the Metropolitan Club, with crystal chandeliers casting soft light over Italian tile, Maya Carter realized something. She had dressed for the wrong room. Outside, beyond the carved mahogany door, 1,000 people glittered. Diamonds, silk, names that appeared in Forbes and Vogue and on museum wings. And her husband was one of them. She turned off the faucet. The voices continued. I mean, I'm sure she's nice, but a pause, a laugh. Poor thing probably thinks that's Chanel. Maya looked down at her dress. It wasn't. This is a golden heart story for anyone who's ever walked into a room and felt like they didn't belong. Before we continue, Talments, have you ever been judged for not fitting in? Because what happens next will remind you why dignity matters more than approval. Maya hadn't always been a billionaire's wife. 6 months ago, she'd been a social worker in Detroit, running a nonprofit out of a converted community center with peeling paint and a furnace that only worked on Wednesdays. She wore sneakers to work. She knew every kid's name. She knew which families needed food, which needed time, which needed someone to just sit and listen. And then she met Jonathan. Jonathan Gray. He'd shown up at her center one afternoon. No assistant, no entourage, just a man in a jacket that probably cost more than her car, asking if he could volunteer. She'd laughed. Actually laughed. You want to teach resume skills to teenagers? I want to help, he'd said simply. And he had. For 3 months, he came every Tuesday. He sat with 17-year-olds who'd been written off by the system and helped them see themselves differently. He didn't talk about his money. He didn't perform. He just showed up. And Maya, who had sworn off relationships after her last one ended with a man telling her she cared too much about other people, found herself falling. Not for his wealth. For his quietness, his steadiness. The way he listened, like her words mattered. When he proposed, it wasn't with a ring the size of a marble. It was with a promise: I don't want to change you. I just want to build a life with you. She'd said yes. But she hadn't understood what his world would ask of her. Jonathan Gray had been wealthy his entire life. Old money. East Coast money. The kind that didn't flaunt but didn't need to. His late father had built a private equity empire. His mother had chaired every major arts institution in New York. And Jonathan, he'd walked away from all of it in his 20s. He'd wanted to build something his own way, something that mattered. He succeeded. By 35, he'd launched a venture fund that supported social enterprises across the country. He was worth billions, but he lived like someone worth millions, which, in his world, meant restraint. He didn't talk about his wealth. He didn't use it as armor. But his world expected certain things. And tonight, at the annual Metropolitan Philanthropy Gala, a glittering monument to power and performance, Maya was meeting that world for the first time. Jonathan had been nervous. You don't have to come, he'd said that morning, adjusting his tie in the mirror. I'm your wife, she'd replied. Of course I'm coming. He'd smiled. But his eyes had been worried. They can be a lot. She'd kissed his cheek. I've handled worse. But standing in that bathroom now, listening to women she'd never met tear her apart, she realized she hadn't. Maya stepped out of the restroom. The ballroom stretched before her, golden, glittering, impossibly vast. A orchestra played something soft and classical. Waiters moved like ghosts, trays balanced perfectly. And everywhere, people in clothes that cost more than most people made in a year. She scanned the crowd for Jonathan. He was across the room, mid-conversation with a silver-haired man in a tuxedo. He caught her eye and smiled warm, steady hers. She started toward him, and that's when she felt it. Eyes. Not curious glances, not polite interest. Assessment. A woman in emerald silk leaned toward her companion, whispered something, and they both looked at Maya. Another couple, champagne flutes in hand, did the same. By the time she reached Jonathan, her skin was hot. "Hey," he said softly, touching her elbow, "you okay?" She nodded, but her throat was tight. A woman approached, tall, blonde, draped in something that shimmered like liquid silver. Jonathan, she kissed both his cheeks, then turned to Maya with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And you must be the new Mrs. Gray." There was a pause, a weight on the word new. "Maya," she said, extending her hand. The woman's handshake was limp. "Charmed. I'm Vanessa Holbrook. Jonathan and I go way back." She laughed lightly. "Practically grew up together." Jonathan's jaw tight and slightly. Vanessa's gaze drifted down to Maya's dress. Her smile widened. "That's darling." Very understated. Maya's stomach dropped. "Thank you," she managed. Vanessa leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't worry, darling. Nobody expects you to keep up." And then she glided away. The rest of the night unfolded in painful slow motion. Everywhere Maya turned, she felt it. The glances, the whispers, the polite smiles that vanished the moment she looked away. She wasn't imagining it. At dinner, she was seated between a hedge fund manager who spoke only to the man on his left, and a woman who introduced herself as Celia Vandermeer, of the Boston Vandermeers, then proceeded to ignore her entirely. Across the table, Jonathan kept catching her eye, concern flickering across his face. She smiled, nodded, pretended she was fine. But when the speeches began, when a parade of wealthy donors stood to applaud themselves for their generosity, Maya felt something crack inside her. These people weren't here to help. They were here to be seen helping. She thought of the kids at her center, the families she worked with, the single mothers working 3 jobs who would never set foot in a room like this. And she thought, what am I doing here? During a break between courses, Vanessa appeared again, this time with 2 other women flanking her like sentries. "Maya," she cooed, "we were just talking about you." Maya's pulse quickened. "Oh? Yes. We're so curious, how did you and Jonathan meet?" The question hung in the air, loaded. Maya kept her voice steady. "At nonprofit I run, in Detroit." "Oh, how noble," one of the other women said, her tone syrupy. Jonathan always did have a savior complex. Laughter rippled between them. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. Vanessa leaned in, voice dropping. "Just a word of advice, darling. Jonathan's world can be and forgiving, especially to people who don't understand how it works." She smiled. "I'd hate to see you get hurt." And then, as quickly as they'd come, they were gone. Maya sat frozen. Her throat burned, her eyes stung. And for the first time that night, she let herself think the thought she'd been pushing down since the bathroom. Maybe I don't belong here. Jonathan found her on the balcony. The air was cool, a relief after the stifling heat of the ballroom. The city stretched below them, lights flickering like fallen stars. "Hey," he said softly. She didn't turn. "Maya, I'm fine." "You're not." She exhaled, gripping the railing. "They hate me." "They don't." "Jonathan." She finally looked at him. "They think I'm some charity case you picked up that don't belong here. And maybe they're right." His face hardened. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true, isn't it? I don't know how to talk to these people. I don't know what fork to use or which designer is in or how to pretend I care about any of it." Her voice broke. "I don't fit into your world." Jonathan stepped closer, His hand found hers. Good. She blinked. What? I don't want you to fit in it, he said quietly. That world, those people, they're hollow. Maya, they've spent so long performing they've forgotten who they actually are. He cupped her face gently. You're real. You care about things that matter. And if they can't see how extraordinary you are, that's their failure, not yours. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you're human, he whispered. And they've forgotten how to be. For a long moment, they just stood there, two people who didn't quite belong, holding on to each other. Finally, Maya spoke. I don't want to go back in there. Jonathan smiled. Then we won't. You have to. You're giving a speech. I'll cancel. Jonathan. Maya. His voice was firm. You matter more than any of this, always. She wanted to believe him. But a small, sharp voice whispered in the back of her mind. For how long? They didn't leave. Jonathan convinced her to stay, not for the crowd, but for the kids. Because the gala, for all its performance, raised millions for youth programs across the city. Programs like the one Maya ran. If we walk out, he said gently, they win. So Maya dried her eyes, fixed her makeup, and walked back into that ballroom with her head high. But something had shifted. She wasn't trying to fit in anymore. She was just trying to survive the night. Jonathan's speech came after dessert. He stood at the podium, confident and composed, and spoke about the importance of education, opportunity, and investing in the next generation. The crowd applauded politely. And then he did something unexpected. I want to introduce you to someone, he said. Maya's heart stopped. My wife, Maya, runs a nonprofit in Detroit that serves over 300 families a year. She does it with a staff of 4. A budget most of you would spend on a vacation. And more heart than anyone I've ever met. He looked directly at her. She's the reason I remember why this work matters. The room fell silent. And then, slowly, people began to clap. Not the polite, performative applause from before. Something quieter, more genuine. Maya's chest tightened. For the first time all night she felt seen. But it didn't last. After the speech, as guests mingled over coffee and cognac, Vanessa found Maya again. This time she wasn't smiling. That was quite the performance, she said coldly. Maya frowned. Excuse me. Jonathan's little speech, very touching. But we both know what this is. I don't know what you're talking about. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. You're a prop, darling. A feel-good story he can trot out to make himself look noble. But don't fool yourself, men like Jonathan don't stay with women like you. Maya's blood went cold. Women like me? Poor, unremarkable, temporary. Vanessa's smile was razor-sharp. He'll get bored. And when he does, you'll be right back where you started, except now you'll know what you're missing. Maya's hands trembled. You don't know anything about us. I know Jonathan. Vanessa's eyes glittered. I know this world. And I know you don't survive here by being nice. She leaned in, her final words a whisper. You're out of your league, and deep down, you know it? Then she walked away. Maya stood there frozen, her chest heaving, her vision blurred. And for the first time that night she believed it. Every cruel word, every dismissive glance. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. She found Jonathan near the bar. I need to leave, she said, her voice tight. He frowned. What happened? Nothing. I can't do this. Maya. Please. Something in her voice stopped him. He nodded. Okay, let's go. They left without saying goodbye. The car ride home was silent. Maya stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Jonathan reached for her hand. She pulled away. Maya. Do you regret it? He blinked. What? Marrying me. What? No, of course not. Because I don't fit, Jonathan. I don't know how to be the person they expect. And I don't think I ever will. Her voice cracked. Maybe Vanessa's right. Maybe this was a mistake. Jonathan's face went pale. Don't say that. Why not? You saw them tonight. They think I'm nothing, and maybe. Stop. His voice was sharp, firmer than she'd ever heard it. I don't care what they think. I care what you think. I think, she whispered, that I'm dragging you down. The car pulled up to their building. Maya got out without another word, and Jonathan sat there helpless, watching the woman he loved disappear into the elevator. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark, replaying every moment, every look, every word. And she thought about leaving. Not forever, just going back to Detroit. Back to the center, back to the life that made sense. Because maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe some worlds were too far apart to bridge. Jonathan didn't sleep either. He sat in his study, staring at a photo on his desk. Maya, laughing, surrounded by kids from the center. And he realized something. He'd brought her into his world, but he hadn't protected her from it. He'd assumed his love would be enough, that his name would shield her. But it hadn't. And now he had a choice. He could let her go. Let her return to the life she knew. The life that made her happy. Or he could fight. Not for his world. For hers. If this story reminds you of someone you lost or almost lost, share it with them. The next morning, Maya found Jonathan in the kitchen. He was on the phone. Yes. Every single one I know. I don't care what the board thinks, it's done. He hung up, turned to her. What was that? She asked. I just pulled my entire endowment from the Metropolitan Gala. Maya's eyes widened. Jonathan. $20 million. I'm redirecting it. To programs like yours. To people who actually need it. Her breath caught. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He stepped closer. Because you were right. That world is hollow. And I don't want to be part of it anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. But those people, your world. You're my world, he said simply. And if they can't see, if they can't treat you with the dignity and respect you deserve, then I don't want anything to do with them. He took her hands. I'm sorry I brought you into that room. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner, but I'm standing up now. Maya's chest ached. What about your reputation? I don't care. Jonathan. Maya. His voice was gentle, steady. I'd rather have a small life with you than a gilded one without you. She broke. And he held her. 3 months later, Jonathan and Maya opened a new center. Not in Manhattan. In Detroit. It was funded by the money he'd pulled from the gala and then some. They hired 20 new staff members, expanded services, helped twice as many families. And Jonathan, he showed up every day, not as a billionaire, as a volunteer. Vanessa sent a scathing email calling him a fool. He deleted it without reading past the first line. Because he'd learned something that night at the gala. The people who mattered didn't care about the size of the room. They cared about the size of your heart. Thank you for spending this time with Golden Heart Stories. If this story moved you, like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Let me know in the comments. And remember, you don't have to fit into someone else's world. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is build your own.